Okay, what was the name of that book again?
Yeah, so welcome everybody. The book that I was referring to earlier is called Disciplined Entrepreneurship by Bill Aulet, who is a professor of entrepreneurship at MIT. It's broken into 6 general themes, like how do you get customers, how do you develop your financial forecast, how do you figure out cost of customer acquisition, that kind of thing. Those themes are color coded and it's divided into 24 kind of essential steps that all startups should go through. And the point I was making earlier is we have a natural human tendency to kind of do what's fun and do what we like and kind of tackle the easy stuff first. But a lot of times in entrepreneurship, we tend to skip some of the disciplines that really need to be part of the overall process of creating a new company around a new innovative concept and, you know, figuring out how to get it to market and get traction. So today's conversation is about MVPs, and I know Mark is intimately familiar with what an MVP is. Mark, you want to tell us what an MVP is in your mind?
Yeah, I don't have probably the exact definition, but minimum viable product here, that is the common, what it is. I can say how it translates to like things that I work on in my day-to-day work. It's a bit for us, it's a bit of negotiation with our clients where we say, look, we've taken all your requirements, all the things you'd like to have, and some things in that list sound fantastic. But if we were to do everything that we needed out of that list and get it done, we might launch in 5 years, right? So, because it sounds like the 5-year plan versus like, how do we get done in 6 months? And
yeah.
So the minimum viable product is, what is that minimum piece that actually is a fully functional working product?
Yeah.
That is the value that you intend. Because in the software business, which is what I'm in, you can always improve and iterate. That's not a question. But you can do the same with physical goods as well. So that's how I think about it, and it's something we definitely do.
Yeah, I mean, it all comes out of lean concepts and agile methodology, right? But the basic idea is don't waste your time building on an extensive product build until you have confirmed that you've got a solution to problem that customers care about and they're willing to pay for it. So in many cases, we try to challenge our entrepreneurs not to build anything, to do that. Paul Graham with Y Combinator has a great expression around this, which is do things that don't scale. So early on, instead of worrying about building the perfect product that is capable of scaling to a massive customer base, do small experiments, do small tests with small cohorts of customers to try to test the key assumptions that are part of your hypothesis about what the problem is, what the solution should be, and who the customers are. Those are all, in the early days, you're surrounded by hundreds of assumptions that you want to try to systematically prove out, either prove or disprove, so that you can refine ultimately what the product is that you're going to build. Another term that comes up a lot in MVP discussions is the concept of sneakerware instead of software, which, for example, DoorDash in its early days, which is a food delivery concept using technology, instead of building the tech platform that enables customers to order stuff from restaurants and have it delivered by DoorDash. In the early days, what they did is they sent out emails to cohorts of potential customers and said basically, hey, would you like to have your dinner delivered tonight? And if so, from which restaurant? And if the customer responded to the email, then they got in their car, drove to the restaurant, picked it up, ordered it, picked it up, and then drove to the customer's house and delivered it, right? So they didn't build anything, They used obviously a process that didn't scale to prove the hypothesis that customers would find the convenience of meal delivery something that they want and something they would pay for. And they also used the early days to kind of discover how the restaurant interaction should work, right? So I think the definition of minimum viable product is essentially what is the least elaborate and in general most manual way to build a product or service to test out the key assumptions that there's a problem, you can solve it, and customers are willing to pay for it, right? Mark, I know probably lots and lots of clients come to you. Well, you just said lots of clients come to you with these elaborate scopes of work, right? On stuff that they want built with all kinds of feature sets and, ideas about user interface and all that kind of thing. And, if they haven't grounded that in customer interactions, they're doomed, right?
Yeah, and the assumptions often are, on top of that, the assumptions are often based on, maybe you could call it their gut instinct, which is not really qualified, right? Like they come to us because we're the experts, but they come saying, well, I think you should do it this way. And then we're immediately like, well, let's let data prove what works. And that's how that lays into what you're talking about with an MVP. I mean, we also have our own opinions and biases. While we may be experts in our field, we have our own, so we have to still look to data to prove the outcomes. And then, we can always say, hey, this is based on experience. We've seen that thing you think's going to work doesn't work. So you may not want to waste time doing that. But, if you want, we can do a small test and go ahead and prove what we know is probably going to happen. And sometimes you talk people out of it, sometimes you don't. That's okay. But our goal is to build trust as quickly as possible. So there's some level of trust, and then we still have to do it with data because our own, like I said, our own biases can get in the way of things.
So for everybody in the room, when you're having a conversation with a client, and in the back of your head, you're thinking, how do they know, how do they know that this is what they should build and that it is going to solve a problem? How do you direct a client to before they try to get into scope of work definition and product build specifications and all that kind of stuff, when you're pretty sure that they're just shooting from the hip and working from their own instincts as opposed to having really hard data from their customers, from the right customer segment, how do you redirect them? How do you have that conversation with a client or with a founder? So let's assume that we're talking about startups here. So how do you redirect a founder to say you're not ready to build anything yet?
I mean, one thing I will say, and I don't have an answer for that right off, but one thing I will say is I also don't want to diminish instinct too much. There's something about wisdom from experience and instinct at some point. Like there's been lots of businesses, successful businesses built with some instinct mixed in, right? And there's probably some luck in there as well. You could argue how much of that, is luck really a thing or not? It's up for debate, right? But yeah, I think the way to guide somebody in that direction is, or away from something, is to not counter instinct with more instinct. Like you almost have to say, well, I think you're maybe headed down a path that's not right because of this. Let me show you like 6 other businesses that have already tried this. And then asking like, what data do you have? What have you done competitive analysis? Have you done persona studies for your users, or customers? Have you, what is it? Because ideas are cheap, right? Like we could sit here right now and this group could come up with some great ideas. It doesn't make them businesses. So.
Well, I had a situation about a month ago, and the guy seemed to have done all his technical, research and developed a product that even had acceptance and a purchase order from a major company, but his profit margins were so thin that I didn't know how the guy was going to make any money overall. And so we discussed all that, and he came back to me about a week ago and said, I've developed another system for producing a product that will save me about 20%. And so he was able to really do the research and do it. And as a result of that, he got more investors involved. So it's a viable product.
So 20% is a margin you could work with.
That's, yeah. It was already about, I don't know, 9-10%, but
yeah,
that wasn't enough. But
especially if you
more like 30.
And if you don't see a way to expand that 9 or 10%, that's challenging.
Yeah. They're gonna, at some point, they're gonna fall in the face.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, that's
Good.
and that's really good redirection in terms of, our experience, like if it's a scalable software kind of focused startup, to get the first version of a product out generally takes somewhere between 100 to 300,000. Does that ring true to you, Mark?
Yeah, well, yeah, I mean, I can relate from the software side of things more, but it's getting increasingly harder in today's economy, especially with even inflation. We're all dealing with that, but like, it's to the point where 100,000 seemed like a lot years ago. Like you do a lot with it now. It's kind of like I don't even. Yeah, 300 starts to sound a little more like what we're seeing, and then like the dollar contracts seem to be kind of the norm. And people are having to swallow that feel a little bit, but it's also the difference between going with a trusted partner and having quality that they need to deliver versus like, my daughter knows a lot about web stuff. Is in high school. It's like you counter that a lot in some way, and it's like, look, that's great, but you have to have a trusted partner. So that's how we usually help to sell our services, is saying we have a track record that is undeniable. We have case study after case study to back it. Trust that we can deliver on time, on budget, and we will be a true partner with you. But yeah, when it comes to the dollars, I mean, I'd say it's in that 300,000 for a lot of web, and I call them web applications because you hardly ever do a website that's just brochureware at this level. In enterprise, it's 300,000 to $1 million usually.
Right. So, so, the hypothesis that there's a problem and the hypothesis that there is a solution to the problem, and the hypothesis that there's enough customers that want to buy that solution is, that's a hard path to go down. I think a good way to redirect founders or even established businesses, established businesses have the advantage of knowing, their customer base. And if they have set up the feedback loop properly with sales and marketing, they should be getting a lot of feedback from their customers about, insights around the use of the product and stuff that, new directions or new product opportunities that could be launched. But even they, 9 times out of 10, don't take the time that they ought to take around working on hypothesis testing and really answering the question of who really is your customer. Who, in your case, Mark, it would be kind of like, if you're designing software for a client under the assumption that a specific set of customers are going to be users of the software, it's like, how do you know who how do you know who your users are going to be, and how do you know what they want, right?
Yep, 100%.
So without being difficult with a client, I think that's a fair question to ask is, tell me about your users, tell me about the customers that you're wanting to serve. How well do you know them? Tell me about the customers, which gets into the persona. It's important for any business to know the persona of their customer, right? And in the case of software development, Mark needs to know, the user that the client is wanting to serve. If it's a teenager, the technology is going to be super different from if it's a baby boomer, right, Mark? I mean, there's going to be different user preferences and uses of technology that have to be considered. So directing the client to get the assumptions on the table is a good thing in my mind. It's like, what have you proven out through scientific testing in terms of testing your assumptions and the hypotheses that you have around this product that you want me to build? And how much of that work have you done, and how much have you really dug into your your customer segments, and how have you decided the segment that you're pursuing first, with this new product or service, or it could be a new feature, right, on an existing product set. So I think it's fair to ask, share that with me. Share with me how you've arrived at this set of specifications and this scope of work. How did you get there? A lot of times, early stage companies will press the easy button of secondhand research, right? Secondary research instead of primary research. So how would you guys define the difference between primary and secondary research? What's the difference between
First-hand knowledge versus second-hand knowledge?
Well, Yes, I think that's a fair answer. Primary research means going out and actually going into the field and speaking with customers. Secondary research is like this study from, Stanford University describes, the problem and the opportunity. Secondary research is important, but it does not trump primary market research of actually going out into the market, leaving the building and talking to the prospective customer segment. And the difference between the two, I think that one insight that I have around that is primary research gives you insights. Secondary research gives you, primary research gives you firsthand insights if you do it right. Secondary research gives you a lot of data, but not necessarily insights. And if they do share kind of based on the data analysis, you're reading a research paper and based on the data analysis, we come to the following conclusions. It's not nearly as rich as, being in the trenches with the customer and hearing exactly why, when, how, where they experience the problem that your product's going to solve, right? Secondary research is very shallow in terms of dimensionality. It's like here's 60% of Caucasian females like to buy their coffee this way, okay? But that doesn't tell you like why is that, and how do they actually buy the coffee? When do they buy the coffee? And how do I get in front of them at the right time with my product or service that has to do with buying coffee, right? So I think part of the redirect on before even going to the point of building an MVP to start testing hypotheses is, have you done your homework? Have you done the primary research? And did you explore at least 10 potential customer segments that could, that might be experiencing this problem and enjoy the solution? Which is really well covered in disciplined entrepreneurship, that a lot of clients and a lot of founders tend to kind of bounce around different customer segment hypotheses without doing the hard work of actually doing deep customer segmentation analysis and intelligently selecting the segment to go after first before they expand out into adjacent customer segment categories, right? It's like, which one do you want to go after first and how do you know? So I would say if I have the sense that a founder or a client is making business decisions to invest in a product build around secondary research and gut instinct, as opposed to a disciplined primary research activity that tests out multiple potential customer segments, that I would tend to redirect them and say, maybe you ought to, before we do the build, I'd like to have more data and more confidence in the customer that we're actually serving. Maybe we should do a little more work there first before we nail down the actual specifications and, finalize this proposal on what we're supposed to build. Right?
Yeah, I think that's the challenging part a lot of times for me. Like, this is outside of the day work I do, but other business things that I have worked through is knowing when to actually convert that myself. Like, because I don't I'm on the other side of it, from a client services standpoint, and I'm the one going, man, I'm nervous. How do I make that decision when it's ready to do the build? Because I am a builder, I'm a developer at heart, so my gut instinct is to start building too early, and this is what
Exactly.
they do. Is they're like, I want to code, but they're not ready, right?
Yeah.
So, and that's the thing you're fighting against. There's an excitement, and there's also that, you know, when you have this idea and the ideas are cheap, there's this weird period where everything's exciting and everything, the world of possibilities. But you hit it at the beginning, Peter. When it gets down to the work, there's going to be part of the work that has to be done that's maybe not the thing that's fun for you. So you need to say, I'm going to do it regardless because it's important to the business plan, or I'm going to delegate it. Maybe you have a partner that enjoys that other side of the work. I see this being a success where people have a founding partner, and hopefully you're not the same, right? You don't enjoy the same things. You have somebody that will enjoy, you know, the other aspects of the business. But, yeah, I mean, we see this all the time, and the more junior developer is, that's what happens. But I know it's not all about software, but that's what I relate to, you know.
Right.
I think it still applies.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, it's the same types of, you're gonna have the same type of personalities, I think, with physical goods, physical products, software products. People are people, and you could probably put different personalities in different buckets. Like these people.
So, you know, I'm a partner in an architectural firm, right?
Yeah.
Those are big spends. You know, people have a problem related to the built environment. They want to build a building, or they want to renovate, or they want to do an upfit of a space. And they're major investments. You know, they're board level kind of capital commitments. What we lead with is define before you design. And the architectural community is kind of like you, Mark. Their first inclination is to put pen to paper, you know, to take a minimal amount of data, which probably has a whole lot of assumptions around it, and just design what the client says they want. You know, instead of taking the position, hey, client, you're about to make a very significant capital investment. Before you do that, let's spend a little more time in the weeds, you know, of the problem itself. We call it programming.
And we say that's what I remember from UNC Charlotte when I worked there. We went through with student union a programming phase.
Right.
And we wound up doing the build with the design with an actual different firm. So that happens sometime. But this is really neat. I'm glad you brought up the architecture standpoint. I would say software development has taken a lot of the ideas from your field, Peter, because we used to call it discovery, but now in the last year or so, we've switched it and call it define. And we're real clear with clients. This is the definition. We used to have trouble with clients saying, no, I don't want to do that. Like they would literally just say, I don't want to do that, because they see the dollars tied to it, and you have to really show the value in it. But if you don't do that, and you're right, if you don't do that part, like you really can head down a road, because I would imagine if a firm, let's say the architecture firm builds medical offices, that's like a vertical that is real common, right? Yeah, there's going to be similarities between them, but like there's different fields within medicine. So maybe a different field needs some different aspects or different considerations. And you don't want to just assume that, hey, all of their waiting rooms have to be the same size, you know, orthopedics versus something else. And, you know, so it's interesting because we just retitled some of our software architects. I propose we start calling them technical architect, and calling software engineers, architects, it always frustrates me. But anyway, it's a whole other thing because it's very confusing. But yeah, that's the definition phase is absolutely critical. And I think the way I think about it, and I guess it's sort of partially answering my own question, how do I convert to build? Is you should be outcomes based and know what is the outcome? What are you expecting from the definition phase? Like, you know, so that you're clear about, I'm going to have these deliverables, you know, whether it's persona studies or competitive analysis or proof of concept ideas or whatever are those outcomes? So at the end of that phase, you don't just cut it off and jump to it. You say, did we accomplish what we thought? Do we need to go back and look at anything? So I don't.
Well, and that happens a lot. You know, they get all jazzed up and excited about what they're doing, and they just don't look at the steps. And I had a situation like that come full circle this week with one of my clients. They're wanting to build a cryptocurrency coin that is just for Native American nations.
Okay.
So the whole sovereignty piece, you know, goes into that and the blockchain and all that. Well, you know, we thought we had the developers, we thought we had the backing, and we did, but we didn't do enough primary research because one of our partners went to somebody that he knew that was big in that world, and he said, wait a minute, hold the phone. Do not go down this road unless you have a white paper. And a white paper is going to cost you $1.5 million to develop. And let me tell you what it does for you. It solves all the problems that the SEC could potentially have with this and all the governmental regulations, because as things in that environment are going right now, they can make a regulation happen just like that, that puts you out of business completely. So what this whole thing is protecting yourself against that happening, and then, you know, go to your developer or whatever. But I'm telling you, this, you got to spend $1.5 million before you do anything.
It's reducing risk. That's what it's all about.
Yeah. And that was an important lesson. So.
Yeah, in the consulting world, the term white paper is another term for primary research, right? Where you actually do have to go out, get out of the building and go collect the data and interview a lot of people and do it's really more than that. It's not only establishing that there's a problem and a potential solution that fits the problem and customers that are willing to pay for it, but it's also what you just described as a pretty complicated risk analysis. It's like, what are all the risks associated with this business? Which actually is another cool thing in the book Disciplined Entrepreneurship is we're used to the term minimum viable product. Bill Aulette talks about the minimum viable business, which is a really useful term for startups, for early stage, innovators, which is what are the minimum requirements for you to actually achieve revenue flow that demonstrates business viability, which I think is a really useful concept for entrepreneurs, which, particularly the ones that tend to overinvest in spending too much time on their pro formas and too much time on, trying to author a business plan versus again, going through a lean methodology of testing a business model and a revenue model, right? So the concept of minimum viable product is useful not only when launching a business, but it's useful when exploring new directions for an existing business, new product, new market opportunities, new product opportunities for an existing business. So the idea of MVP isn't like one and done. the idea of MVP, in my opinion, goes all the way through, enterprise scale, right? As an activity for the most simple, least expensive way to achieve confidence that there's a problem, the solution's correctly targeted, and there's a large customer set willing to pay for the solution. And having a really good idea of who those customers are and how to get in front of them. So I like to use Flywheel as an example for these things, right? We are constantly innovating and testing, aren't we, Sarah?
Absolutely.
What's a recent example?
So I guess a recent example was, because of the pandemic, right? We came through the pandemic really well because we spend a lot of time and effort focused on community building, focused on, caring about our members and trying to help them with their business needs, whether it's introductions or opportunities for exposure through our events and programming, and making it a, everybody has a choice. Everybody can, in these days, everybody can work from home, right? And everybody can work out of coffee shops and all that kind of thing. So the reason people come to Flywheel on a repeat basis is more than anything else the community aspect. They feel like they're part of a community and that they're going to meet interesting people and be exposed to resources that might help them out.
That's
So in the
interesting.
pandemic- Good.
If they don't have that, you don't have the community here, you really have just buildings, right?
Yeah.
It ultimately.
Yeah, I mean, we might as well be Regis, right? So
Right.
Regis,
Go ahead, Peter.
Regis is a, flexible provider of flexible space on a short-term basis, but try to get to know somebody at a Regis location. It's it's not that easy.
Yeah, that's interesting.
So recent things that we've experimented with and tested is, we're constantly adjusting our events and programming to try to be responsive to, what people are interested in, what they're looking for. We developed the Pitch Space platform during the pandemic because it was impossible to have in-person pitch events. So we figured, let's spin up a digital membership-based platform that continues to connect startups with investors. And that worked okay. What we definitely learned that virtual experience is not nearly as strong as the in-person experience. So the importance of the in-person events is still kind of one of the highest values that people get out of that. But we made a lot of assumptions when we launched that platform around the value thesis for the customers we were serving, for both the startups and the investors. And what we learned, and we didn't build a real expensive platform. It's still not a very expensive platform. I mean, it could be a lot more sophisticated in terms of integrated communication functions and, information reservoirs and so on and so forth. But we did want to go through the testing and experimentation phase. What we learned was, having a startup create a profile and the value proposition of us doing a recording session and post-production editing and making it look professional. That was good, but it's not enough to keep somebody active on the platform, right? So we learned that for Pitch Space to be successful, we have to add community building ingredients to the platform in terms of more frequent communication and more value add. So for example, we have learned that there's a strong desire to have much more integration with our learning management system. So once you're on the Pitch Space platform, you can actually go into our curriculum as a value add service and continue learning as a startup founder. On the investor side of the platform, we haven't really aggressively built the investor side yet because we want to load up the startup side. But on the investor side, we learned that one of the most important features on the investment side was sortability, the ability to sort by area of focus, because investors don't want to waste time looking at companies that are not in their investment space. So, you know, that's a product and a service that we launched in 2020 that we're continuing to refine and build as we go through the learning process of engaging with customers. I've also learned that for that to be successful, we need a person that's doing it full time. So I don't have a person doing it full time yet, and I don't have the budget for that yet. So I've got to figure out how to make that happen.
That's interesting. I'd love to see that sometime.
Yeah.
That
We've
probably-
also started, what do we call our free co-working days? We call them free co-working days, right?
Yeah, community day. Yeah.
Yeah,
So
community
we'll
day.
do a free day of co-working if you haven't tried us out before, and then we do a member lunch called You're So Fly, and we hear from a flywheeler to just kind of get to know one another, talk about what they do, what makes them so fly.
So the free co-working day is one of the most effective marketing tools we've ever implemented, because it attracts people who fit our profile and our persona to come try the space out. And if they see and experience an active community, they're likely to convert to members. So it's kind of a way to get people who are inclined to use co-working spaces anyway to come try it out and check it out. So Sarah, how many of those have you done, and what kind of conversion rate do you have on that?
We have had 2 so far, so maybe that's
one
not the
Wednesday.
best sample.
Wednesday
How many conversions? Any?
Yeah, Wednesday, yeah. But even through things like when we invite folks, if they're out at like Art Walk or something like that, hey, come try us for a free day or come take a tour or whatever. You know, it is a nice conversion rate because it's, oh, you know, I probably wouldn't come in and just see it anyway. There's a hook to it. There's a reason that I'm coming. So it's been fun to introduce people that way that have signed up as members.
It's interesting that people, what is the daily rate of Flywheel? $20?
It's $20.
It's interesting. Someone paid $20 to try it out, but
Yeah.
I mean, I find that interesting, like why that is, because these days $20, right? That's not
Right.
much. I mean,
Well, free has a lot of connotations to it.
yeah,
You know, I think they're getting by with something.
yeah, that's right. And
They don't really know the cost.
And so it's interesting when I worked at UNC Charlotte, the student groups learned that they actually should charge a minimum dollar amount, because if it was completely free, students thought there was no value. Like it must be terrible. But it sounds like this is different, right? And it maybe it's because you are targeting people who would already have a tendency to co-work.
Yeah.
It's just enough to push them over that, whatever that mental hurdle is, because obviously $20 isn't enough if they can of a hurdle if it.
Yeah.
But
yeah.
mentally, it must be a blocker.
Right.
You know.
Yeah. Well, and too, I think there's something to, you know, every tour comes with a free day of co-working. So if you just come in and take a tour, you see our ad or something, you can come in and
That's awesome.
you can work here for the day. I mean, once you can do that once.
Yeah.
But so many more people take advantage of it when it's like connected to it's community day, and we, you know, we do these member events, and so I think, you know, having a reason to go and be there for the day is helpful too.
And Wednesdays are good days. They're
And
probably
Wednesday's a
busier.
good day.
Yeah.
Yeah, it just kind of jives with everyone's schedule. So yeah, kind of gives you a reason like, yeah, I think I'll go today. Today's the day I've got to be there versus I'll try it later or whatever.
That would be a good topic, Peter, for a future event, is to talk about how the ideation of Flywheel,
Yeah.
creating a business plan,
That'd be
how that
cool.
works. I've been involved in co-work spaces over the years, and every co-work situation is different. As you know, there's no one co-work business that's the same. Like you would think they're the same, but
Right.
they're
come in
all
and
they're all
work
just so
and-
different. And
Yeah.
that's because I found I go to a certain co-work spot and it's like, for some reason it's not my vibe. Can't put a finger on it. Why? And I go to another one and I'm like, oh, this feels like it's for me, so.
Interesting.
Yeah, I mean, some of that has to do with design attributes. I mean, our business model took several years to discover. After going through a lot of pain. And what we discovered was in second and third tier type cities, smaller markets, that to have a meaningful revenue volume and revenue flow, you have to build a decent sized space, right? So you have to build out more than 20,000 square feet, which is a significant investment for a small market. So the reason you don't see a lot of options in secondary and tertiary size cities is it's hard to make money as a co-working enterprise because there isn't enough. The demographics don't really support that size of space, and unless you have a certain size space, you're not even making a lifestyle business, right? So to provide these larger innovation centers in smaller markets like Concord, you can't run a passive model. You can't, say we're going to design a really cool space and people just come and use it. You have to actively engage the entrepreneurial community and provide a lot of value-added resources that hopefully give them, the reason to come to that space. And community is also key. That nurturing the community. So
Yeah.
Mark, something you might be interested in is we're cooking on, we're getting ready to test the hypothesis that Charlotte, the greater Charlotte region is rich with tech talent. You think that's a true statement?
I think there's a lot there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And most of that talent is employed by large corporations.
And the banks, financial.
Right.
Yep.
But a lot of tech talent has an entrepreneurial bent, even though they're working for large corporations.
I would agree with that. I know folks in the banks that some of them in their mind, they have like, what is that next business idea?
Yeah,
they have?
right.
And nothing wrong with that job or whatever, but they want more freedom. It's about their personal freedom and
freedom and alignment of passion, right? Yeah, I mean, you can work as a software developer for Bank of America, right, for a long time if you want to, but it might not be, feeding your soul in terms of fulfillment, right? So that
working on someone else's product. That's what I hear developers say. It's fine, but I'm working on their product, not something I'm interested in.
Right. So these are all assumptions and hypotheses that we have to test, but the hypothesis is that there's a plethora of tech talent in Charlotte, in the greater Charlotte region, that's employed by corporations, that a subset of that population, are viable founders of startup enterprises, and that we can attract them to the Cabarrus Center with the right structural support program. So what we're thinking about publishing out as an opportunity to test this hypothesis is an accelerator program that provides in-kind developmental services, so software development up to a certain point, right? So like a design sprint and maybe a preliminary MVP concept, not necessarily a build, but we'll take you through a design sprint. We have an attorney that will take you through all the organizational stuff, incorporation and organization. We have a marketing guy. And by the way, Sarah, I need you to send me Justin's email address because I want to reach out to him about this. But we have a great, branding and marketing guy, and we will surround you with a preliminary set of in-kind services so that you can come to the Cabarrus Center and experience a lower cost place to launch your business in a community that's got really great quality of life and a cool membership community.
Oh, yeah, that sounds really intriguing.
Yeah.
I think there's some definite potential there.
So the idea is that the components are software development expertise, legal, marketing, accounting, and Flywheel would provide, business, the lean startup methodologies. And that we would publish this out to the greater Charlotte region that, we're now accepting applications for people that want to be surrounded by those resources. But you got to be willing to locate in Concord. So the caveat is, that it's not going to appeal to somebody that's deeply rooted, in a school system or with kid, who knows, maybe they'd move their family for this. I don't know. But anyway, we're working on developing an accelerator program that is, it's not dangling money in front of somebody, it's dangling a whole package of services.
Yeah, but that can be, sometimes that's more valuable than just raw cash, right? Because somebody could, Peter, you could say, Schropp, I'm going to give you $500,000. I believe in you, right? But if you don't believe I know what to do with that $500,000, like that's risky business investment. But
yeah,
if you provide the guidance and expertise from people that you trust, that can be huge. Yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah. So the deal is you got to work out of the Cabarrus Center, so we're probably going to require a 12-month minimum commitment. And the initial package of quote unquote free services would be, provided in like a 90-day acceleration kind of activity. And the other thesis we're working on, Mark, is that if you're the in-kind service provider, like if Peter Marsh has to put time into this, I only have bandwidth for a certain amount of time, right? That I can do essentially pro bono upfront. So the idea is to do one company at a time and have a rolling entry kind of process. So if we're going to do 5 companies a year, we would get a company started. They would go through a couple of months of development with our resource providers. And then, I didn't even know Kristen was on. Sorry, Kristen.
I think she was just listening.
I completely ignored her. And then, and then we would bring the next company in. So it wouldn't be cohort based. It would be kind of a rolling entry type program.
But the advantage is it's very focused during that time.
Yeah.
So that's a good thing as well. Yeah, you have other resources throughout your connections and Flywheel. I think though, it's to network people, like that's another benefit, right? Like to, if somebody comes in and says, I got this idea, I'm working on this thing, and they're through the accelerator program, there's still opportunities to help use your network to share
like, hey,
Yeah.
you two together,
Right,
you know, just know, you should know each other, you know,
Yeah.
kind of thing.
more
So,
naturally too.
yeah.
Yeah, and that would give us a core of tech startups in the space around which I think we could build, an increasing community.
Yeah, I could see doing much of that, and you'll be looking to expand.
Yeah.
So that's it. That's interesting. Yeah. I'd
Yeah.
love to see that. I'd love to see that. I believe in tech, and there's a lot of great things that happened in and around Charlotte. The pandemic rolled into a spin, for a while, but I'd
Yeah,
love to see
part of,
that.
I actually was on a regional economic development call just before this launch. And one of the comments that I made, we operate in multiple regions, right? We're up here in the Triad, we're down in Greenville, South Carolina, and we'll continue to operate in multiple ecosystems, even more over time. And what I told it's called the Centralina. It's a council of government group, right? What I told them is what's different about your ecosystem is how the preponderance of the corporate, this is a really corporate market. So, there are lots of alternatives for high paying jobs in Charlotte, right? And I said, I think that what the opportunity you guys are missing is encouraging mid-career professionals that are currently employed by major corporations to entertain the idea of entrepreneurship. There is no program, there's no structure around that proposition that here you are sitting on one of the hottest tech talent markets in the United States, but they're all employed by big corporations, or most of them are, so, and actually, if you do a regression analysis on successful startups, almost all of them are started by mid-career professionals. That's where the really good founders are.
I didn't know that, but I could see that.
Yeah.
There is something about that's, that experience does count for something, because you've been in the battle a number of times. And
Right.
you know what it feels like, and it's, yeah, I could see that totally being the case.
Yeah, I mean, organizational experience is important, and having a lot of knowledge about a market vertical is also very beneficial. But anyway, so my hypothesis that we're going to be doing some MVP on this, right, Mark?
I like it.
We're going to, we're not going to spend a ton of money on it, but we're going to put an application-based site out there that says, if you're interested in getting a full package of the typical services that a startup needs to launch a tech company, we offer that in our Concord facility, and if you apply, we'll review your application, and if we love you, we'll bring you into the program.
Yeah, that sounds great.
Well, thanks for sharing lunch with me today. We're over time, so I want to tie everybody up. Sarah, take a picture of the repairs.
I will. Will do.
All right, thank you.
Thanks, Peter.
We'll see
All
you.
right, everybody take care. Bye-bye.